Hmm. Hmm. Who else is going to be worthy of filling the holes on this shelf? Let's find out. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our new introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below. It gives you a pretty good overview of what the horror movie syllabus is all about and how we look at a particular subgenre of horror and then pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. And this is our doctorate level selection where we revisit one of the subgenres that we've already done a video about and recap it a bit and then pick a 4th doctorate level selection, something that's maybe either a little bit more deeper cut or maybe a little newer or something like that to keep the conversation going. Today we're revisiting the slasher icon subgenre, which is hands down one of my absolute favorite subgenres of horror because it's just one of the most fun subgenres for me. You know, we're talking about the franchise guys, the best of the best, the most famous of the monsters. You know, these are our modern day Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman, our modern day universal monsters, if you will. We talked about that in that original video about how these are famous monsters, so famous that even people who don't like horror movies know nothing about them know who these people are. They know these killers. That's how ubiquitous they are. That's how ingrained into the public consciousness and the pop culture lexicon they are. We spent some time discussing this phenomenon and how popular these characters are, and we vacillated between that and me just kind of geeking out over these characters because they are some of my absolute favorites. And so when I did the discussion of the movies for these slasher icons, I was really enthused about it. And I picked arguably really obvious choices because they are super well known. And I'm going to go ahead and recap them for you in just a minute here. But after we do that, I'm going to go ahead and give you the doctorate level selection, something new that I'm really excited about that I think a lot of you are probably excited about as well. But first, that recap I promised you. Let's do it right now. The first slasher icon we discussed was Michael Myers, and the movie, of course, was Halloween. And we talked a lot about how important this movie is. Even though it's not the first original slasher movie, it really often gets credited with the slasher craze, and probably rightfully so, because a lot of the movies that you see going through the 80s and the height of the slasher era really are derivative of Halloween. We talked about how creative it was, how well made and how well crafted it was, how good the score was. All of this attributable, of course, to John Carpenter, the legend, and how this is endured as not just a classic movie, but as a classic character, in part because of the iconic look and in part because of how mysterious he is, how his motivations seem kind of nefarious and unknown and spooky, and that unknown aspect of it adding to the spookiness of it. And of course, we talked about how the franchise undercut that by giving his motivations a little bit more clarity, giving him a little bit more motivation. And there's opinions may vary as to whether or not it was successful or not. I love all the sequels. I talked about them in the video, but not everybody agrees. But everybody seems to agree that this original is a classic. It's the best of the bunch. If you haven't seen it, of course, you absolutely need to see it for your horror education. It's really one of the best movies out there. The next slasher icon I mentioned was Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th series. And we talked about this movie in particular, the first movie, and how it's a bit of a surprise for people, especially modern day audiences, who are expecting to see a hockey mask killer and don't get that because Jason, as a killer, doesn't really show up until the sequel and doesn't even get the hockey mask until the 3rd movie. And we talked about how this is endured as a classic movie film series, even though it really was originally a ripoff of Halloween. They made no bones about it. It's a Halloween ripoff, but it became its own thing in part because of this iconic character of Jason and how they made him so imposing looking and so scary, and how brutal he is and creative he is with his kills. I talked a lot about how it's my favorite of the slasher icon series. I just love it, even though Halloween is arguably better quality. I just love Friday the 13th more. It's just my jam, and I shared a few personal stories about it. So if you want to hear those, go back and check out the original video. But suffice to say, Friday the 13th is a total must for your horror education as well, and also just a really, really fun ride, especially if you like a creative kill. And the last slasher icon I mentioned was Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. And if you want to talk about creative kills, this is the series to talk about with its rubber reality dreamscape, where there's a killer who's killing people in their dreams and then they're dying in real life. It is really a unique and original concept. And that was the thing about this one that really made it stand out from the pack. The other thing that made it stand out from the pack, of course, was the character of Freddy Krueger, a wisecracking, likable, talking slasher icon as opposed to Jason or Michael Myers. And he's this wisecracking guy that everybody likes, but he wasn't like that in the original movie. And we talked about that, how he's actually much more scary in the first and even the second movie, and doesn't become wisecracking Freddy until part three. And honestly, the wisecracking undercuts the scariness for me and makes him my least favorite of the three slasher icons, but I still have love for him. Talked about that in the video, but there's a lot of people who love Freddy. He has endured. In fact, he's arguably the most famous of the three at this point in time, but who's splitting hairs on that one? They're all three icons for a reason, and that's why we talked about them in the video. But now it's time to talk about a doctorate level selection to join their ranks. Our doctorate level selection for the slasher icon subgenre is X. X came out in 2022 and is directed by Ty West. And you've heard me talk about Ty West a lot because I'm a big, big fan. And this is really him at his best. This is one of his best movies. He's really just at the top of his game here. And it really pays off in a really exceptional movie that has already gotten a sequel, or really technically a prequel, and is getting another movie to round out a franchise as we speak. It hasn't come out yet, but it's going to come out. So that's why I'm going ahead and picking it for a slasher icon, perhaps a little prematurely, but I'm really confident that this is going to be another slasher icon. Now, if you haven't seen the movie before, it's about a group of porn producers, a couple of actors and a producer and a cameraman, who rent out a barn on this farmer's land, this old farmer's land, so they can make an adult movie. Only the farmer and his wife are very strange and really kind of off-putting, and there's definitely something that's not quite right on this farm, but our protagonists, our porn protagonists, haven't quite figured it out yet. And as they try to unfold the mystery, the hijinks abound and they come fast and quick and bloody. But we won't say any more so as to not spoil the movie. But this movie really was in my wheelhouse for a number of reasons. The first of which is the aforementioned Ty West. I'm a big fan of his. I'll see pretty much anything he's doing. And him making a slasher movie is just, it's like an underhanded softball pitch for me. It's right there in my wheelhouse. I want to see that. Second, Ty West is doing what he always likes to do, which is to take a certain like genre or subgenre or time period of movies, a movie making style, and kind of emulate that or homage it. And in this case, he's doing like the 70s grindhouse style, and he's doing it really, really well. Now, it's worth noting, he's not shooting it like a grindhouse movie, like the grindhouse movie that we've talked about previously. He's not trying to make it look like it was filmed in the 70s, but it has a 70s aesthetic to it, both in terms of the fact that it's set in the 70s and also just the way he makes everything kind of look. But it's clean. It doesn't look like Texas Chainsaw Massacre in terms of film stock and lighting and things like that, but it really evokes Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's a lot of people that compare this movie to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think that the comparisons are apt. It really is kind of evoking that intentionally. It really wants you to think of that and movies like that. And that's what he's doing. He's doing what he does. He makes a modern movie that feels like it's not a modern movie, and he does it masterfully. And in this case, he's hitting a subgenre in an era that I really love. It looks fantastic. It really is hitting my sweet spot in terms of giving me the mood, the atmosphere, the creep factor. I'm really buying into what he's selling me on this journey, on this setup for this movie. The next thing this movie's got going for it is a really exceptional cast. It's got Jenna Ortega before she really broke out big, and this is honestly one of the movies that made me really like her even before she did Wednesday and everything like that and Scream. So this is one where I got on the Jenna Ortega train. A little late, but earlier than some, I guess. It's got Brittany Snow. I love me some Brittany Snow. And they even found an opportunity for her to sing in the movie, and she's got a beautiful voice, and she's great in this movie. She's kind of playing a caricature, but she's doing it really, really well. It's got Kid Cudi in there for some reason, but he's actually great. But the real star of the movie, both literally and figuratively, is Mia Goth. Mia Goth is doing incredible work here in dual roles. And I might be slightly spoiling the movie for you a little bit, but given the fact that Pearl, the prequel, has already come out and everybody kind of knows about it, I feel like I can talk about this a little bit freely. Mia Goth playing both a young woman and an old lady, and she is incredible in both roles. She really is bringing like an amazing talent here. She really sells you on the vulnerability and the toughness of both characters, and you feel a certain pathos for each of them. And it really is an impressive performance or dual performance, playing off of herself and kind of being this mirror image of herself, both literally and figuratively. It really adds a layer of complexity and interest to what is otherwise a rote slasher movie. And when I say rote, I don't mean bad. I just mean that, you know, you've seen plenty of people go to a farmhouse or another secluded area and get picked off and murdered. But rarely have you seen it done like this, where you have not only a really unusual killer, but one that you have a certain feeling for. You have a little bit of a sensitivity towards, or really kind of a sympathy for. It's hard to explain. Again, I don't want to get too spoilery. I've already spoiled it a little bit, and I really don't want to get too into it. But the fact is, it's just an interesting angle to take. And I've seen some people maybe make the argument that really it's just kind of like any other slasher movie, and I have to disagree because of this angle, because of who the killer is, because of how the killer is played, because of how it's written. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really think this is a movie that needed to have a sequel or really a prequel, even though it got overwhelmingly good reviews. Everybody really seemed to like this movie. And even though it was a modest box office hit, it made money. I really didn't think it would warrant having additional movies made. But I was wrong, man. We're going to talk about Pearl sometime later on the channel, so I'm not going to dig into it too much here. But suffice to say, I didn't think that we needed Pearl. And then I saw Pearl, and it only makes X that much better. It only enhances the experience that much more. And it solidified to me that we had to add this to the slasher icon lexicon. It really is. And we haven't even seen Maxine, the upcoming third movie in the series. It hasn't even come out yet. I don't even know when it's supposed to come out yet. But I'm already this confident that we've got an iconic killer that needs to be added to this list. So it gave me an opportunity, a perfect opportunity to shine a light on this movie. Not that it really needed a light shine, because again, it's really, really well known, really popular. Ty West kind of getting mainstream. We've talked about a lot of his movies. None of them nearly as big or as popular as this one, but this one broke out for a really good reason. I do think that Maxine is going to be good. You know, Pearl, arguably better than X. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on that. Again, we'll talk about Pearl more in the future, but could Maxine be better than both of them? I don't know. But even if it's not, I really feel like the three of them together are going to really reinforce this really fascinating character, or characters. We'll have to see how Maxine goes. But it's got a really interesting thread going here that I can't wait to see how it ends. So we're definitely going to add X to the slasher icons. If you haven't seen it for some reason, if you like slasher movies, you absolutely got to check it out. You absolutely have to check it out. And if slashers aren't your bag, this is not going to change your mind on it, because it really is staying true to it. But it's just a really well-made movie with incredible performances, especially by Mia Goth. So it's a must-see in my book. So check it out if you haven't seen it. And of course, if you have seen it, let's talk about it in the comments below, because I love X. So that's our doctorate level selection for the slasher icons. But as usual, I like to give you a extra credit selection. But it was a little hard this time because so many of the slasher icons were already talked about on the syllabus in other subgenres, because I just wanted to work them in. So we've already covered Candyman and Chucky and Jigsaw and Pinhead and Ghostface. We've already talked about a lot of the big and obvious ones. So the one we're going to talk about today is Horace Pinker in Shocker. Shocker came out in 1989, and Horace Pinker is the killer in that movie. And this is a Wes Craven directed film, written and directed by Wes Craven, and it is more of a cult classic, if anything, and really didn't break out. It really kind of failed to launch a true slasher icon, a true franchise. But we're going to talk about it anyways, because, well, this is probably a pretty good place to talk about it. I'm not sure what else to talk about it, but it's worth talking about. Now, if you haven't seen it before, Horace Pinker is a serial killer who kills families, and he's terrorizing the neighborhood, and everybody's trying to figure out who he is. And a young man is starting to have dreams about him. He's the son of the sheriff, and or son of a detective, and helps his dad catch the killer Horace. And when Horace is executed, he becomes something else. He becomes essentially like an electricity-based ghost, and he starts wreaking havoc all over again as a supernatural killer. And I'll stop there so as to not spoil the movie for you, although the movie is all over the map. it really is kind of a mess of a movie, and that's probably why it really wasn't very successful. It's all over the place. It's clearly got some Nightmare on Elm Street envy on there because Wes Craven's kind of just come off the Nightmare on Elm Street success, and so he's kind of emulating that. Maybe it's studio directed, maybe it's him, but he's kind of emulating it with the dream aspect of things. But then he's got this supernatural killer of Horst Pinker, again, kind of like Freddy Krueger, who kind of cracks jokes and has a personality and has also got these powers that are a little ill-defined, but it's really kind of a mess. It's just kind of going all over the place. It's partly a Nightmare on Elm Street remake. It's partly like this comedic jumping through different TV channels thing. It's partly this body swapping thing, kind of like Jason Goes to Hell. It's got a lot going on. And in fact, my buddy Josh from Movie Timelines likes to make the joke that if you're not liking the movie, just wait 10 minutes and it'll become something else. And that's not a bad explanation of it. The problem is, does it become something else that you like? And for me, kind of. Here's the thing. I don't love this movie because it's such a mess. I don't love it the way the cult following loves it. The cult following has really made this into kind of like a big cult hit or a big cult, whatever. People love Horst Pinker. They love this movie. I don't. I don't love it, but I do like it. And the reason why I like it is largely Mitch Pileggi playing Horst Pinker. Pinker is a great character. He's got that personality. He's got that smarm to him that Freddy has, that menace to him that early Freddy had. I really like what he's bringing there. And it's funny because Mitch Pileggi, to me, is Skinner from the X-Files. That goes big X-Files fan. So it's really fun and funny to me to see him in this role, just chewing scenery as this limping, menacing, murdering antagonist that, almost like an anti-hero. He's a strong character that deserved to get a franchise. He really did deserve to become a slasher icon. To really kind of nail it home. It's unfortunate that he doesn't really stand up to these other ones, but it's in part because he is kind of a carbon copy or a pale imitation of those other icons, in particular Freddy, that he fails to succeed. That said, the movie, it's not like it's unwatchable or anything like that. It overstays its welcome a little bit. It is all over the map, but it's got enough fun stuff going on and enough ludicrous stuff going on that you can have a good time with it. It's unintentionally campy, and then I think sometimes it's actually intentionally campy. So it rides that line, but it rides that line fairly well. Like I said, I don't think you'll have a bad time watching it. I certainly don't. But you're not going to love it either. If you haven't seen it before, I don't think you'll love it unless you're just really game for a really goofy movie. And this is what I think it is. It's a goofy movie that doesn't do enough to scare me like, say, Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, but does have the same kind of schlock factor that those movies have. Enough so that I wouldn't have minded seeing some sequels. I wouldn't have minded seeing them franchise this out because I do think it could have found its footing. Most people will say that Freddy Krueger didn't find his footing until the third movie. I disagree, but that's a whole other story. Watch the video. You can hear me talk about that. But if you think about Horst Pinker and what he could have become, it's a bummer. It's a bummer that this one didn't really land. It's a little bit of a misstep for Wes Craven, but it is one that's really worth talking about. It's one that I really wish had kind of continued, despite the fact that I don't love the first entry, and one that I think is worth mentioning as an almost slasher icon. So that's what we're talking about, an extra credit and not on the actual syllabus proper, but that is our extra credit selection for the slasher icon subgenre. So that's going to do it for our exploration into the slasher icons. Hopefully when Maxine comes out, it kind of proves me right that the X series or the Pearl series deserves to be here alongside these other greats. And I really think it will. I think it's really that good. Both of the movies are excellent. So if you haven't seen them, check it out. But now it's time to check out a Horror Trivia Pursuit card. As usual, I'm going to read a question here live on camera, and then I'm going to try to answer it live on camera, see if I can get it right without embarrassing myself. And of course, because we're talking about slasher icons, we're going to do the killer category on the card. And the question is this. Real-life killers Ed Gein and Elmer Wayne influenced the creation of what character in 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Well, this is an easy one, isn't it? This really kind of is the perfect question to have for a slasher icons video, because the answer is a slasher icon. Now, it's not Freddy, Jason, or Michael Myers. I'll give you that clue right off the bat. But this is another slasher icon. Now, we did not talk about this slasher icon in the original slasher icon video. We talked about them in a different subgenre. Like I said, I squeezed a lot of the other slasher icons into other subgenres because they needed to be on the syllabus somewhere, and there's only so many spaces for each subgenre. That's the whole point of the syllabus. So this guy got talked about somewhere else, but he warrants being a slasher icon for sure. He definitely warrants being in there. So I think that most of you probably know the answer to this. You horror fans know the answer to this. And honestly, this is the series that I can think of. Well, not the most recent one to get an installment, but one of. There've been a lot of the slasher icons that have been getting installments lately. Jason and Freddy, not so much, but the other ones have been getting one. And this guy got his own new installment, new reboot, pretty recently. Whether it was good or not is a whole matter for another discussion. Obviously, giving you a little bit of time to think about it here, but I don't think you need to think about it too much. Either you know this or you don't. If you don't, you're taking a guess. But honestly, we all know this, right? The answer, of course, is Leatherface. But we'll check the card, and it is Leatherface, aka Bubba. And yes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface deserves to be a slasher icon. He is an iconic character. The images of him, his whole look, his aesthetic, totally iconic. In fact, we just talked in X about how they were mimicking Texas Chainsaw Massacre and paying homage to it because it's an iconic movie, an iconic killer. So yes, of course, Leatherface is a slasher icon. We didn't talk about it in the video, but we did probably name check him. I don't remember. It's been a little while since I watched my video because I'm not as much of a narcissist as you'd think. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you stuck around. I hope you got the question right. And if you didn't get it right, let me know what you answered because I love me my wrong answers. But until next week, until we do something completely different, class dismissed.